So as you can see here on the screen, we have a sample writing task 1 prompt from the IELTS exam. This isn't a real task. This has been simulated for the purposes of this course. But as you can see, we have 2 parts in this question. We have the part on top, which is always a written prompt. So we have 2 short sentences, 2 short paragraphs describing the task. And then we have the visual chart itself. As you can see, we have to spend 20 minutes on this task, and we're expected to write a response that is at least 150 words long. Now, as you can see here, the question, the written part of the question, is made up of 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph that you see here, the first sentence basically that you see here, we will call the description. Because what it does is it very briefly introduces what the data is showing in the chart. And we have a very basic structure here. The structure is always subject, verb, noun phrase. And the way this works is subject is the type of chart. So it could be the line graph, the bar chart, the table. The verb is shows, describes, something like that. And then we have a noun phrase. The line graph shows something. That something can be presented in the form of an extended noun phrase. Let's take a look at this example and you'll see what I mean. So here we have the line graph, that's the subject. The line graph below, right? So sometimes we have below, sometimes we don't. But the line graph below serves as the subject. The verb is shows. And what is it that's being shown? As you can see, the number of students enrolled in 4 academic fields at Northview University between 1965 and 2005. All of this, the part that starts from the number of students all the way to the end, is considered the noun phrase. And as we will see, this noun phrase will play a very important role in our understanding of the chart. Now, the second part of the question is fairly straightforward. It's always the same sentence. So more or less, you can expect to see the same sentence here. And the sentence is, summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Now, because this description is repetitive and we have the same sentence all the time, sometimes students don't take it very seriously. They don't read it. Now, if you've read it in advance and you know what it wants from you, then great. But if you're taking the test and you're just skipping through this part, you may be making a very big mistake. And I'll tell you why. You see, in the description, you are asked to do 3 things. And all 3 play a very important role in the way you're going to be marked on the test. So number 1, it says summarize the information. So what does this mean? It means you shouldn't report everything you see in the chart. You see, in many cases, if you were to report everything you see, then you're going to write a very, very lengthy type of report. Why? Because sometimes the charts that we're given contains a lot of information. Imagine you're given a table with 10 columns and 10 rows. That means you have, 10 columns, 10 rows. You have a lot of data to represent here, right? So are you able to report all of those numbers? Probably not. So what you should do instead is summarize the information by selecting only the information that is very important and that matters, and leaving out the details that are not of primary importance. So summarizing is a very important goal here. Now, what do we need to include? Right? If we're summarizing, we need to make a decision. We need to say, this is important, this isn't. So what is considered important information? As you can see, in the prompt, it says, summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features. So one of the things we need to learn in this course is what is considered a main feature And how can I identify these main features in the tasks and the charts that I'm given? So the ability to distinguish between what is considered an unimportant detail versus a main trend or a main feature will be an important part of your task. And finally, the question says, make comparisons where relevant. Remember my example of a table with 10 columns and 10 rows? Now, if you were just presenting the data and not even drawing any comparisons, you have a lot on your hands. Now imagine if you're also comparing all of this data together. So you're comparing A1 to A2, that is column A, row 1 with column A, row 2. You could be comparing A1 with B1, that is row 1, column A with row 1, column B. So as you can see, it can quickly get very confusing and out of hand. So it's up to you to only report the comparisons that have some kind of significance or have some kind of meaning associated to them. Now, don't worry, as we proceed with our lecture series, we're going to look at all the different segments and components and the types of charts. And also, I would like you to view how these types of questions are answered. That is, how one can summarize information and how one can identify main trends and also draw meaningful comparisons that will be significant in the examiner's viewpoint. All right, so as you can see, we've looked at the two parts of the written part, the written segment of the task. So we have the description, which follows a subject, verb, noun phrase construction. It introduces the data. And the second part, which is asking us to summarize the data, select main features, and draw relevant comparisons. Now, the chart itself is presented to you. In this case, as you can see, we have a sample line graph. Now, we will later see what parts of this chart you need to pay attention to. And we're going to look at the different types of data in the next lesson. But for now, what I need you to do is to be very mindful of the fact that this chart that you're describing will not be visible to the reader. What do I mean by this? I mean, you shouldn't assume that the person reading your report will also have this chart in front of them. The examiner will have access to the chart, but that's different. As the examiner is reviewing your writing, they will assume that the reader, the target reader, will not have access to this chart. So you basically need to write a report which is self-explanatory. You cannot assume that certain features are going to be understood from the chart itself. You should never make such assumptions, and the writing you produce should be self-explanatory, independent, but still firmly grounded in the information that you can see in the task.